We'll now move on, and I have the absolute pleasure to welcome an extremely courageous lady. For those of you who know Victim Support Europe, you know that it's important for us to hear directly from victims and survivors, to give them a voice, but to hear directly about their experiences. And we'll now hear from Nina Fuchs, who is a survivor of sexual assault and who will be speaking about her experiences of the criminal justice process in her country. So Nina, thank you very much for your willingness to speak today and share with us your story. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Levent. Hello, everyone. As Levent said, my name is Nina. I'm from Germany and I'm a survivor of sexual violence. I'm a bit nervous because normally I don't do this in English and not in such a context, so please excuse my nervousness. I would like to start by telling my story, which starts in April 2013. When I was out with friends in a club in Munich, and my drink got spiked. I have a 1.5 or 2 hour blackout, and the moment when I regained a bit parts of my consciousness, I was in the middle of a rape. There were 2 men I've never seen before in my life, and one of them raped me. The next day, my sister took me to the police, which unfortunately was a very traumatizing experience for me, because the police didn't believe me, but I will talk about that in a bit more detail later. The forensic doctors who examined me roughly 12 hours after the incident could unfortunately not find any traces of the rape drugs because it was just too late. They can only be detected for a very short time. But they could find traces of a DNA of one of the perpetrators. I got massive support by the German victim support organization Weißer Ring. They provided a lawyer for me for free, and this lawyer has been with me for many, many years and supported me, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Due to this situation, I could also appear as a joint plaintiff and got access to the files and all the information. In February 2014, 10 months later, the case got closed because there was no match in the database with the DNA. From 2016 on, I started with something like advocacy work because I found out that there was a general lack of knowledge regarding the topic of rape drugs. 2 years later, in May 2018, I received a letter from the prosecution that they had a match in database and that they had found the alleged perpetrator. So my case was reopened and further investigation was done. I was full of hope at that stage because due to the DNA, for me, it was very clear that the person they have found was indeed the perpetrator. Unfortunately, on the 2nd of January in 2019, I received a call by the prosecutor telling me she didn't see a chance for conviction and will close the case. Her reason for that was, for me, something I could not really handle very well. I will quote what she wrote in her letter. The DNA traces are indeed proof that physical contact between the victim and the suspect took place. However, since the victim cannot remember long periods of the night of the crime, it cannot be proven that the suspect is actually one of the 2 perpetrators. in particular, one cannot be sure that the victim had sexual contact with other men during the night of the crime. Under these circumstances, the suspect is more likely to be acquitted than convicted. There are therefore no grounds for filing a lawsuit. So even though they acknowledged that I was, due to the blackout, not in a state where I could defend myself, and there was the evidence of the DNA, the case was closed and I never got a fair trial. My lawyer saw the situation very different. He saw a chance for a conviction. So he filed a complaint. For that, he needed my file and all the documents. And what was very weird was that the prosecutor had actually removed 5 pages out of this file to create a separate volume just out of 5 pages. And when my lawyer finally received those 5 pages, it was it contained the report by the forensic doctor, in which, among other things, typical rape injuries on my upper arms were documented. So a weird way to handle that, in my opinion. So I felt really treated not fair. And I started a petition because I knew that filing a complaint is not has not very high chances to be successful. So my petition was very successful. Until today, more than 110,000 people have signed it. So with that petition, both my journey as an activist and my journey through the German justice system started. Due to the success of the petition, there was also a lot of interest in the media, and so I talked openly about my case in a lot of TV programs, and I got contacted by a lot of other survivors of sexual violence. So what I learned in that was that my story is actually not just a very tragic individual case, but it's the standard. And I heard many stories where, compared to that, mine is actually a very pleasant story. So I'm here now talking to you just by myself, but actually I'm representing many, many cases and many, many stories and voices. This is also shown if you look into the statistics in Germany. Like in every country, we have very high number of unreported cases. This is roughly in Germany 85%. So from the 15% left, only 7.5% are convicted. So this means that if you have 100 cases of rape, it will lead to approximately 1 conviction. So this is very sad, actually. So to come to my journey through the justice system in Germany. In the end, the complaint my lawyer filed was rejected by the Attorney General's office. So the next step you can do is called enforcement proceedings, which has barely a chance of succeeding. It's roughly 2 to 5% chance. I still did that, but it also got rejected by the higher regional court. So in last year, in July, I filed with a lawyer a complaint to Germany's Federal Constitutional Court, which is the highest level I can go to in Germany with my situation, where I want to fight for just receiving a fair trial, and it's denied. With the Federal Constitutional Court, there was actually 0 chance in succeeding, but it was my only way to get to the European Court of Human Rights, which is actually right now the case because, as expected, the Federal Constitutional Court rejected my complaint, and that was 1 year ago in December last year. So right now, my case is at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and I'm waiting to hear from them. So I'm fighting now almost 3 years, and this fight has cost me a lot of strength, time, and energy. It is not an easy fight, but on top of that, it has also cost 22,000 euros just for costs and lawyers. Luckily, I didn't have to pay that myself. I was able to finance that through crowdfundings, where I had many, many people who supported me with that, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I could not have paid for that myself. So the question is, why am I doing that with all those levels where I already know in advance that I have zero chance or almost zero chance? So already at that time in 2019, I knew that I wanted to found an organization to fight for victims of sexual violence and that their voices get heard. So I encourage victims to report and to fight for their rights if they have the capacities. So for me, it is very important to actually walk the talk. So to be an example and do the things that I preach. And also, every case is a reference for another case. So I fought really, really hard to change something. But in the end, every level confirmed the decision the prosecution made, which in my point of view is just a free pass for every perpetrator. Because if you say we close the case because the victim has a lack of memory, I think this is really damaging to get this message out. So this is why I kept continue fighting, even though I didn't really have the chance to succeed. Since I've never been inside a courtroom, I wanted to tell a quick story of another survivor of sexual violence. It was a very young woman, and she was also drugged and raped by 2 men who came from very rich families and had a lot of money to pay for 4 very excellent lawyers. In the courtroom, those lawyers made the court watch the victim the whole video of her rape, which she didn't remember because she had a total loss of memory. The court said yes to that. The judge responsible agreed that this victim had to watch her own rape on video from the beginning to the end. She said it was like going through hell, actually worse than hell. So in Germany, the definition of rape is at the moment, after we had a change in the law 2016, no means no. So you either have to defend yourself physically or say clearly no. So the problem is that there is an absence of consent in our law. And this is problematic, which is also something that Amnesty International in their report, Right to be Free from Rape, published in November 2018, agrees. So I would like to quote. The amended legislation, however, does not focus on the absence of consent as such, but on the victim's expression of their refusal to engage in the sexual act. The no means no model is problematic as it implies the existence of consent by default in every situation where there is no express refusal to engage in a sexual act, as opposed to interpreting consent as active participation and or affirmative expression. According to this model, women consent to sex perpetually unless they state otherwise. And in other words, if you're passive and cannot say no for whatever reason, and there are many, this can be seen as consent within our law. And a study from Sweden shows that 70% of people in a situation where they don't want to have sexual action are in a state of shock or what's called tonic immobility, so they just cannot say no. For this, we started a petition to change the German law and get this aspect of consent and only yes means yes into our law. I said I wanted to talk about the police, and I know that I'm running massively out of time, but I was told because I'm a survivor and I can go a bit over time. I mentioned before that my experience with the police was very traumatizing, and sadly I have to say it was more traumatizing than the rape itself. So I was told, this is a very common expression in German, and I heard that throughout my childhood, police is your friend and your assistant. And I experienced the exact opposite when I came there in the worst situation of my whole life. So even though there was zero indication that I was lying, they still didn't believe me. And they told me literally, this thing with the rape drugs doesn't really exist. It's just a media hype. So there has been done research that showed that a lot of people who work for the police believe rape myths, and this is connected to the credibility of the victim. So if something doesn't match with their view of how a proper rape should work, then it leads to the fact that they don't believe the victim. And this is a very big issue. The biggest issues I see in general is that on all levels, police, prosecutors, judges, they are not educated and trained on the topic of trauma. And this is really an issue, because how are they even able to be competent to do their job if they don't have information on the most important thing which they need to make their decisions? Because a traumatized person reacts very differently to a non-traumatized person. And this is also something that is not taken into account in the deadlines and periods you have. 2 examples. After the suspension of your case, you have 2 weeks to file a complaint. If you are traumatized and suffering from PTSD, it is very hard to make this decision in 2 weeks. It is impossible almost, because you have to deal with the emotions and everything first. And the second is, after your enforcement proceedings are rejected, you have 1 month to file a complaint with Germany's Federal Constitutional Court. This is exactly the time the lawyer needs to file that complaint, because it's a very complex thing. In my case, I was drained emotionally so heavily that it took me 2 weeks to make that decision if I want to fight further or not. This complaint cost 10,000 euros, and I knew there is 0 chance of winning. It was a very hard decision, and it was not easily made. So in the end, my lawyer had only like a week or 10 days to do that complaint, which he normally needed 1 month. So this also leads then to lower quality, obviously, if he hasn't that time. Then another problem is that we have a massive gap between offender protection and victim protection in Germany. If you look on the side of the victim, there are no protocols for police interrogation like it's with kids, that it has to be taped on video. So every time the victim has to reproduce everything. This also leads to the fact that they are not allowed to do trauma therapy before there is a trial at court, because this could affect their memory. So they are prevented from healing, actively prevented from healing by not being allowed to do trauma therapy. This cases often takes ages. There is one famous case in Germany right now by Gianni Temple. It's our most famous Me Too case against director called Wedel, and she's been waiting for 3 years that the case will be opened in court. So this is very torturous, and often victims have to undergo a credibility assessment, which is also a very torturous hour-long procedure. On the other hand, the offender, there is no credibility assessment. The offender is allowed to lie. This is in our law. And if it takes long, this is actually an advantage for the victim, because the more time has passed, the lower will be the sentence. So this is not really fair. So to sum it up, what we need, in my opinion, is we need longer periods for the victims to react to certain decisions. Then also, as Mr. Sonnenschein just said before me in his speech, we definitely need more training and education on all levels in the justice system, at the police, especially on the topic of trauma. And in general, we definitely need more victim protection and empathy for victims. And of course, we need only yes means yes in our law. Thank you so much for your patience and letting me go way longer. I would like to thank Victim Support Europe for this invitation and giving me this platform to speak. I also want to thank Weißer Ring for making me, bringing me into contact with Victim Support Europe and supporting me throughout all those years. I thank all of you for your attention, for your patience, for listening to me. And I thank everyone who is supporting my NGO and my work and my fight for a better world for victims of sexual violence. And also, like Mr. Sonnenschein, I will stay here for a while and answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. You won't have seen the comments, but there are many comments which are expressing their real appreciation for your courage, not only to speak today, but also to really stand up for victims, to be their voice, knowing how little chance you have with your own case, yet willing to put forward your own money, your own energy. So I think that was an extremely powerful speech. I think, just to quote back, your experience with the police was more traumatizing than the rape. I think if you have people and victims saying that, you have a problem with your system, which is exactly what we have to resolve. And I think you've brought across so many issues, which we'll discuss today, and I won't unpack those, but what it says is that we have to change our rules, our procedures, our behaviors. And when it comes to sexual violence cases, really it comes down to the fundamentals even of how you define certain crimes and how victims are recognized. And certainly we see movement in countries like Sweden, for example, where the concept and the definition of rape has been changed to recognize some of these difficulties. I think when we talk about rights and you say you have zero chance of success, that you have to question whether that's a genuine right in reality. So there's a lot for us to think about there. You've really set the scene very well for us. I'm sure we will stay in contact, and I really wish you every success in all of your work and in the proceedings as well. So thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much, Levent.